Here we are again with Tasting Wine with Pete and Dave. Now, some more exciting news, Pete. The website and the little videos, these audio tastings that we're doing are going really well. And I'm getting some really fantastic feedback from people. And I know you've had some good feedback as well.
I've had people actually talk to me about it, which always surprises me to find out that someone's interested in anything I might have to say. So, yeah, it's really quite interesting that we've got a bit of a following, if you like, for want of a better word, that people are actually interested in what we're doing, which is good.
Yeah, and I want to encourage people to subscribe to the OzwineTV. Now, when you go to YouTube, there's a little button you can click on that subscribes you to that channel and to our wine tasting. That way, people are notified when I put a new wine tasting up online.
All right.
And they can experience that. And I would like to encourage that people go along and learn as much as they can about the wines.
Well,
and
they can help us to learn as well.
And that's right. And a fantastic thing about all of this is if you think there's an interesting wine that you want to taste along with us, you can go back to this. In other words, you can go out and purchase that bottle of wine. You can taste it with us and play this over and over again and see if you can get the same characteristics.
And then you can get in touch with us and tell us how wrong we were.
Exactly. All right, we've got about 9 wines here this morning, Pete, and we're doing this a little differently this week. We're doing it in the morning, but we've got the...
That's when your palate's at its sharpest, so the scientists would have us believe.
We've got the McWilliams Elizabeth Simeon from Hunter Valley.
Oh, right, okay.
Now, I've got 2 vintages here because I pulled a 2011 vintage out of the fridge, but in the retail situation, we had a 2012 on the shelf.
I think 2012 is current, but there are still 11s, I guess, floating around in different bottle shops, so people will have that option that they could potentially buy either one or both of those at the moment in shops around the country. So.
And it's really interesting to experience and share the difference in 1 year or what the wine actually will achieve in the bottle over a year's period of time.
Well, as they say, what a difference a year makes. And you're looking at the characteristics of Hunter Semillon when you learn how to pick those characteristics. You can see them in both of these wines, but they are significantly different from each other.
And that 2011, I get some very typical Simeon characteristics, some kind of straw characteristics.
Yep.
There's definitely some good acid there, and that's what's going to help that wine age.
Absolutely, yeah. You get quite a lot of acid. You'd expect that. I mean, it is still essentially a young wine, but you're starting to get some of those straw-like characters, if you like, which come through with Hunter Semillon. And those characters become more noticeable and more prominent as the wine gets older.
Now compare it here with the 2012.
And the nose is completely different.
Oh, it's just amazing.
It is.
It just about jumps out of the glass at you.
Well, it does, and you're getting like those grassy, zesty, sort of almost citric elements. But there are characteristics in there, and you can see a little bit why, if you sort of extrapolate as to why the Semillon Sauvignon Blanc blend works so well in Margaret River, that you're getting characteristics in young Semillon that are not dissimilar. When they're that young, they're not dissimilar to what you get in Sauvignon Blanc.
I'm getting almost this green apple
Absolutely,
Granny Smith's.
Yep. And yet there's no suggestion of underripe character. Normally when you think, green, it means, this means the fruit's not properly ripe, but it's just the particular character that you get on that wine in that vintage, and that's quite significant to notice the difference between the two.
Yeah, it's incredible the difference between those two wines, and I would encourage anybody who wants to learn a little bit about wines. This is a good varietal to actually try that.
Absolutely.
To learn the differences.
It's a great thing to do if you can look at them side by side. As we talk in Wine Speak, where we talk about looking at a wine, we're actually obviously assessing it, smelling it, tasting it, evaluating it. And if you did that with those two Semillons side by side, then it's a really instructive exercise.
Yeah. All right, the next wine we've got here is the Kellermeister's Rambling Ruins Pinot Gris. Okay. Now, this is an interesting one too, Pete. This is a 2012 vintage, and I'd like to talk a little bit again about the difference between the Pinot Gris and the Pinot Grigio.
Well, again, we always say that that is the concern, if you like, for punters, for people who are buying wine, is to pick up the characteristics and the differences and what they're expecting to get from a wine that's labelled Grigio and a wine that's labelled as Gris. Now, this one's labelled as Gris, and yeah, you're certainly getting some of those varietal characters on the nose that you associate, that people talk about with Pinot Gris, i.e. Pears, for example. You're getting that nashy pear sort of aromatic character, but when you get it on the palate, it's quite a bit zestier and zingier, and it doesn't have that unctuous character that you perhaps associate with, you know, an Alsace style. So you're not thinking that it's going to be automatically that really rich Gris style. You're thinking it's perhaps on the palate even a bit more like a Grigio.
Yes, yeah, and I get a little bit of lemon in there.
Yep, and those characters manifest themselves, I guess, more thoroughly, more completely on the palate. So interesting, and I guess it is young as well, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the next year or so. As a 2012, it might fill out a little bit, it might put on a bit of weight, so to speak, and it might become more like a Gris, but at the moment, on the palate especially, it's more like a Grigio style.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. All right, next wine we've got here is a McLaren Vale, Wira Wira Shiraz, 2011.
Okay. Well, these folks make some of the best wine in McLaren Vale. They make lots of good booze, Wira Wira. Really a famous label and a very reliable label. They make lots of wine and they make lots of good wine.
Now this is called the Sparrow's Lodge.
Okay, so this is a straight Shiraz.
Yes.
Now 2011 is an interesting concept. I think we may have mentioned this before, that it was generally regarded as a less than brilliant vintage across most of the South Australian heartland areas. But in McLaren Vale, they did a little bit better than most of the other areas. So
That's a big but, because there's a lot of fruit in this.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you were to judge that based on the preconception of the vintage being substandard, then you'd be letting yourself down, because there's a lot of really bright fruit in that.
Oh, yeah.
Really
big
supple
plums.
fruit, yep. And not too much oak getting in the way of it as well, which is a good thing in a wine of that style.
It's great. Now the next one we've got here is the Henschke. Now, this is a 2011 Barossa. This is Henry 7. Now, this is a blend. This has got Shiraz, Grenache, and what we call here in Aussie, Mataro.
Mataro, Mourvedre. They seem to, most of the big winemakers, or the main makers, seem to be vacillating a little bit. They were really happy to call it Mourvedre a couple of years ago. Now a lot of them are starting to think, no, we prefer to call it Mataro. We want to sound like we're Aussies. So
the fruit on this is just some of those light berry fruits, and
Absolutely.
I get just a little bit of that confectionery, which I suspect is the
That's
Grenache.
the Grenache, yep. You're getting a little bit of that sweetness, a little bit of that lollishop character, but in no way is it in the way, if you like. It's not too much. It's not. Sometimes when you get a straight Grenache, you can get those characters almost seem like a caricature of wine, that there's so much pronounced character. I think an interesting thing too, we found previously with 2011 in the Barossa, that the Grenache-based wines do really well in a particular style, and this is all about really vibrant fruit.
Wow, on the palate, it's like a symphony.
It does, yes, well, and you'd hope so as well, because if you're getting 3 different grapes in there, you'd like to think that they all work together. That, you know, that
it's interesting, Pete. I get just a slight sort of a cedar characteristic, and what came through was, I remember as a child sticking my head in my mum's cedar chest, and that sort of jumped out at me just then. That's amazing.
And yet, it's not a character that comes from oak, because they don't use a lot of oak in this, and what oak they do use is very understated. It's just a particular character that comes about as a result of the synergy between those grapes, that vineyard area, and that vintage, and that's just what we're getting. So a classic Henschke style.
Wow, that's nice. All right, the next wine we've got here is the Shot Fire. That's the Thorn-Clarke.
Thorn-Clarke Shot Fire.
That's another Barossa, but this is 2010 vintage. This ought to be big and juicy from what I understand about my 2010s.
So now the Shot Fire, they make a Cabernet which is called a Cortage, and they also make a Shot Fire Shiraz. So this one's the Shiraz, yeah?
Oh, the first thing I get on the nose, I get a bit of oak there.
Oh, yeah. Big sweet oak, lots of sweet fruit as well, but there's no shortage of oak on that one. As opposed to the previous 2 that we looked at, this one's got plenty of oak, but it's got enough, basically, fruit vibrancy there to carry that oak.
Oh, there's a bit of chocolate in there. There's a bit of those big Shiraz,
Absolutely.
Barossa Shiraz characteristics.
Yeah, dark berry fruit.
Yeah.
A little bit of dark chocolate as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's a wine for lovers of big Aussie reds, and a great vintage. 2010, we've said it before. We'll say it again, and so will others. It's a great vintage, if not the best in the last 20 years, then pretty close to it. And this really does do the vintage justice, I guess. It's a great drink.
Would complement that big slab of protein.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so.
Nice big red steak. Okay, samples, Shallonbar Shiraz. This is a 2007, so this has got a little bit of age. Now, this is from Bendigo?
Yep, yeah, Grampians actually, Central Victoria sort of region, but we often do that. It's a bit of a catch-all because there are so many regions that are quite small but scattered right across Victoria. When you're driving from one wine region to another, you can often find yourself just going down the road and 20 kilometres after you've left one, you're in the middle of another one. There are so many different vineyards and so many different regions that are very close to each other. The Shallonbar style has been around a long time. They used to call it Shallonbar Burgundy. This one is quite distinctive, and you're getting dark fruit on the nose. You're also getting quite a healthy whack of tannin on the palate, which is not something you automatically associate with Shiraz, but it is part of the Shallonbar style.
I just got that, Pete. It feels like I've got to peel my lips off of my teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would not normally expect to get that in a Shiraz. It's more a characteristic of Cabernet, obviously, but yeah, it is part of the Shallonbar style, and it's what they do.
Wow, beautiful. And that is beautiful fruit as well. That'll go for a long way.
Yeah, there's almost like a tarry element that comes across on the nose as well. But that's a symptom of the style of wine they make and a little bit of bottle age. It's rising 6 years of age now, so we're starting to get a little bit of that maturity, but it still has quite a way in front of it.
That's a fabulous wine, and I just suspect it'll even get better. All right, the next wine we've got here is Jacob's Creek, St. Hugo. Now, this is a Shiraz Cabernet 2009.
Okay, this is an interesting release in the sense that there was a time, not so long ago, when if you saw St. Hugo on a label, it had Orlando up the top of it to start off with. It wasn't just known as Jacob's Creek, but it was Cabernet. They still make the St. Hugo Cabernet, and some of those older St. Hugo Cabernets from Coonawarra can be astonishing. But the head company now has expanded the range. They've got Shiraz Cabernet, they've got a GSM in it as well, they've got a straight Shiraz, and the fruit source is wherever they think the best grapes will come from. They're not just focusing on Coonawarra to make Cabernet Sauvignon as they always did. So here's an example of that stylistic interpretation that I was just referring to. They've got some Shiraz here from the Barossa Valley. They've also got some Cabernet from Coonawarra. 2009, a very, very good vintage. And yeah, it's an interesting blend that they've put together.
Lovely fruit, beautiful tannin, really well balanced. That's a lovely wine. Now, there's a number on the bottom of that bottle too. Are all the bottles always numbered with?
They tend to do that. I'm not entirely sure why they do, to be honest, because the numbers always seem to be quite high, and I don't know that you would feel particularly special if you got bottle number 67,645. However,
but it might look interesting in your cellar.
It may well do that, yes.
All right, and the last one. Now, the last wine today is Tabilk. Now, interesting, again, and I've spoken about this before when we've tasted Tabilk wines. This is a Cabernet from 2009, and Tabilk, just one of my favorite family-owned wineries. 150
absolutely.
Years here in Australia, and they still make their wines in the family tradition.
They do.
Which I got to give them a lot of credit for. Fabulous, fabulous wines. I did a vertical tasting back to 1953 at one time, and I couldn't believe that 1953 wine, how fruity it was, Pete.
How much life it still had in it.
Amazing.
And Tabilk does have that capacity to do that. I think the interesting thing about Tabilk is that their reds in particular tend to be, I guess, Tabilk wines first and foremost. They do obviously have the varietal character in there. This is a Cabernet. I tend to think across the board that Cabernet is probably what they do most successfully, but they do great Shiraz as well, and you're looking at characters in that are unmistakable Cabernet, and yet, even more importantly, I think
big dark berry fruit on the nose.
Even more important though, they are quintessentially Tabilk, and that's really what makes them special.
And there's a sweetness on the palate straight away, I suspect, coming from the oak and the fruit combined. And again, the wine is so well balanced, that oak and that fruit in there. I would imagine that this wine would go for a long, long time.
Oh yeah, well it's medium bodied in the best Tub Ilk tradition, but it's all about balance. And the great thing about a great wine is that it is all about balance. It's the most important characteristic. You can have all the fruit, but if you've got too much of one thing and not enough of another, then it's not going to be as well balanced and it won't live as long. If you want a wine to keep a long time, it needs to be well balanced. And Tub Ilk do that. They do it very well, and that's a classic, iconic style from an iconic maker.
Great. Well, thanks again, Pete. And
we'll catch up again. We'll catch up again in a week from now, I guess.
Yes, we will.
Thanks very much, mate.